Tonight, the end of an icon. General Motors announces the axing of Holden as a brand. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. "200 Australians to be evacuated from the Diamond Princess and sent to quarantine in Darwin. The federal court upholds the AFP's right to raid the ABC.
This should send a chill down all of our citizens' spines.
And Adam Scott back on the winners list.
Yeah. It's official.
It was about as Australian as it gets. For generations, the Holden was iconic, but that era is about to come to an end. The American parent company, General Motors, will axe the brand by the end of the year. It means 600 workers will lose their jobs.
Your favourite car, Australia? Holden!
It's been ingrained in Australia's identity for decades.
We love football, meat pies, kangaroos and Holden cars.
But after 160 years, the Holden name will soon be relegated to history.
This is a tough day for the Holden family.
3 generations of Cara Bertoli's family have driven Holdens, and she even worked for the company.
When you're loyal to the brand, you kind of hope as much as you can that it doesn't happen.
Holden's American owner, General Motors, wants out by the end of the year, saying the brand is no longer a wise investment.
We locally tried everything to keep Holden going until it was evident it would take good money after bad.
There are still 1.6 million Holdens on the road, but sales hit the skids years ago.
The writing's been on the wall for quite some time. Holden sales have been in free fall for the last 3 years.
Following the Second World War, it was quite a different story.
Australia needed a special motor car.
Sales soared when the first FX was launched. The boom times continued for the FJ, the Kingswood, Tirana, Monaro, and its most popular model, the Commodore.
A new kind of car for Australia.
By the 1990s and 2000s, the company was feeling the pressure from overseas car makers, including Toyota and Mazda. It gradually laid off thousands of staff at its Adelaide and Melbourne plants before bringing local manufacturing to an end 2 years ago.
We knew that it was tough times for them, but certainly didn't expect that they would leave Australia.
Holden's exit also came as a shock to the federal government.
Australian taxpayers put billions into this multinational company, and they let the brand just wither away on their watch.
And it's disappointing that they only advised the government of this decision just before their announcement.
General Motors' New Zealand and Thailand operations are also being shut down. Holden has 185 dealers in Australia and another 31 in New Zealand, and the company has promised to fairly compensate them. James Hancock, ABC News, Melbourne.
The wait is almost over for 200 Australians desperate to get off the Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan. But there's a catch. They'll be flown back to Australia on Wednesday, but they'll have to spend another 2 weeks in quarantine in Darwin because infections continue to spread on the ship. Tokyo correspondent Jake Sturmer reports from the ship's port in Yokohama.
After nearly 2 weeks of quarantine, Australians aboard the Diamond Princess have a ticket home.
I have a job that I have to go back to.
The Australian government will charter a Qantas flight to bring passengers back on Wednesday, but it comes at a cost. Another 2 weeks of quarantine at a former workers' village in Darwin.
This is just a little too late. Why couldn't they have made this decision 10 days ago?
It's frustrating and it's unfortunate, but it is absolutely necessary to ensure that we put the measures in place that have been so effective.
The US evacuated hundreds of its citizens early this morning.
All right, this is it. We're about to step into the big wide world.
Americans who tested negative for the virus were allowed to board a chartered jet home.
As the infection rate continues to grow, ambulances are now coming in and out of this port constantly. The question is the outbreak on board contained or is it still spreading?
Nearly 10% of the 3,700 passengers and crew who were on the Diamond Princess are believed to have contracted the virus. But there's a potentially even more dangerous scenario now unfolding. A passenger who disembarked another cruise ship, the MS Westerdam in Cambodia, has since tested positive. The 83-year-old American took a flight with more than 140 other passengers to Malaysia's capital, where the infection was detected. It's unclear whether passengers who continued on to their home countries may have also been infected, as well as the more than 1,000 passengers who flew home from Phnom Penh, raising fears the virus could spread well beyond the 26 countries so far affected. 39 Australians remain in Cambodia's capital.
They are in the process of being tested by Cambodian authorities. 10 Australians have remained on the ship itself as it is docked in Sihanoukville. The Cambodian government is making arrangements to test those people who remained on the ship.
The owner of the Westerdam, Holden America, says it's trying to track down the hundreds of people who were able to head home to make sure no one else has been infected. It's that prospect which has health authorities worried, a turning point to a potential pandemic. Jake Sturmer, ABC News, Yokohama.
When the Australian evacuees eventually arrive in Darwin, they'll be confined to a former workers' village on the city's outskirts. While it's not exactly like home, the government says at least it'll be far more pleasant than being trapped in a tiny ship's cabin.
It's been home to 266 people for just over a week, and on Wednesday this top-end workers' village will welcome 209 more.
These are your grandparents. This is nans and pops stuck on a ship in Japan who've been there for 14 days.
The stranded Australians have already spent 2 weeks in isolation on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship, but concerns about how effective that's been mean they'll be spending another 14 days in quarantine at a former workers' village just outside of Darwin before they're allowed to go home.
These people need to go into quarantine because we are not entirely convinced that the quarantine procedures on that ship were 100% effective.
Some might say they could be released or sent back to their communities right away. However, caution is the word of the day.
12 to 15 AUSMAT clinicians will be leaving from Darwin and across the country later this evening. They'll arrive in Yokohama tomorrow morning to bring those 209 Australians back to Darwin. Here they'll be kept separate from the group, which has been in quarantine since last Sunday. The new evacuees will be serviced by a separate medical team, and authorities say will pose no risk to the community.
The quarantine zone for the second group will be even further away from the local Good Shepherd School than the first cohort and presents absolutely no risk to the families, the children, the teachers and the school and the community of Howard Springs.
If someone does become sick, it's likely they'll be stabilised at Royal Darwin Hospital before being moved to a hospital near their homes.
If they are mildly unwell, they'll stay where they are. If they need further treatment, that treatment will be done with full PPE and, in other words, personal protective equipment.
The group is expected to arrive on Wednesday. Melissa McKay, ABC News.
Meanwhile, the evacuees who've been in quarantine on Christmas Island are now on their way home. The quarantine period is over and flights have been arranged to most mainland capitals. Reporter Jean Kennedy is at Sydney Airport for us tonight. Jean, when is the Sydney-bound flight due to arrive?
Juanita, this is a government-chartered flight and it's due to arrive here at Sydney Airport just before 8 o'clock this evening. Now, these passengers were among the first group of more than 200 people who were evacuated from Wuhan in China and taken to Christmas Island because of the coronavirus fears. And they've been there for that required 14-day quarantine period, but no one has tested positive to the virus, so they are all allowed to leave, and they're all on chartered flights heading into capital cities around the country this evening. There is a second group who arrived at Christmas Island a few days later, so they're sitting out there 14 days and they will be allowed to fly out on Wednesday morning. But tonight at Sydney Airport we're expecting some very happy family reunions and very relieved passengers who will be able to head home and sleep in their own beds tonight.
Jean Kennedy reporting there from the airport. The The ABC has lost a legal challenge over a federal police raid on its Sydney headquarters last year. Officers seized 89 documents relating to reports about Australian soldiers accused of unlawful killings in Afghanistan. The national broadcaster says today's court ruling is further evidence of the need for protections for public interest journalism and whistleblowers.
It was this AFP raid on the ABC's Sydney headquarters last year that prompted the national broadcaster to question its legality.
I think fundamentally the court rules that the AFP have the right to enter a newsroom, to fossick around in confidential files, to take information about the way it undertakes its journalism with its sources, and this should send a chill down all of our citizens' spines.
The AFP officers were after information on a series known as the Afghan Files, which involved allegations of unlawful killings by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan. The reports relied on leaked defence documents. The search of more than 9,000 confidential documents has been described by the ABC's managing director as an attempt to intimidate journalists for doing their jobs. It's a blow for public interest journalism and a blow for the Australian public's right to know.
I make of it that the court case has been run and it's had a finding.
The issue here is with a government which pretends that it cares about press freedom but does nothing to protect or advance it in our community.
For the journalists Dan Oakes and Sam Clark who wrote the stories, there's still no decision on whether they will face charges.
There's nothing wrong, in fact, with any of the stories that were published. There's no sense that we did anything to jeopardise national security or anything else, and yet these two journalists still have no clarity over whether they'll be charged with a crime for doing their jobs.
But the AFP says this investigation is still ongoing, so it would be inappropriate to comment. It says it respects the court's decision. Liv Casbin, ABC News, Sydney.
The bushfire recovery effort is so immense, even backpackers are being urged to help out. Whether it's working on farms or assisting communities to rebuild, their efforts will be rewarded with extended visas.
They're young and fit and looking for adventure. Now the government is hoping a backpacker army will soon be coming to the aid of communities devastated by bushfires.
There is so much work to do. We need all hands on deck, and that includes the international backpackers who we know want to make their contribution as well.
These backpackers in Sydney's King's Cross are ready to jump at the chance, particularly given that it will be considered part of the 88 days of farm work they need to complete to be able to stay another year.
I think it's wonderful because Australia needs this thing to reforest all the bushfires.
I think it's brilliant. We was going to volunteer anyway, but now that it comes for the 88 days, that's even better.
Because it helps the country and also it helps us to be able to stay, so I think it's fair enough from both sides.
Volunteers from an organisation called Blaze Aid are already hard at work helping to rebuild fences.
There's been quite a massive interest internationally with the bushfires. A lot of young people have wanted to come out and help. They can come out now.
For American backpacker Taylor Unger, the offer has come a little too late.
I'm thrilled. I think it's a great idea. I just wish it would have happened sooner, whether it's planting trees, helping the animals, something like that. I would have really loved to get more involved.
A chance to give back before continuing the journey. Ursula Malone, ABC News, Sydney.
Severe weather conditions are possible for parts of the state tomorrow, but it's not all about rainfall, Graham.
No, wind's going to be a real feature, Juanita. With thunderstorms today, we've had some very strong and damaging winds. We've still got a fairly broad area of the state underneath the severe thunderstorm warning, including many of the northern districts. But areas west of this trough are actually likely to see very strong and gusty southwesterly winds developing in the afternoon. Showers and thunderstorms with damaging winds in the east, but those winds through the west and southwest of the state, they're likely to pick up more dust. So just a reminder that the drought is far from over. I'll be back with the full forecast details shortly.
Thanks, Graham. Still to come this hour, the banks accused of turning a blind eye to internet scammers.
They don't care what name's written on any money transfer.
They're allowing a scam. They're facilitating fraud.
There are so many problems with false billing these days.
Also, what rights do you have when the government wants your land for a major project? That's coming up.
One of Australia's most prestigious Catholic schools has been rocked by the revelation that its headmaster gave a character reference for a now convicted sex offender. St Kevin's College in Melbourne hit the headlines last year when its students were filmed singing a sexist chant on a tram. Now, a Four Corners investigation has revealed that a Year 9 boy was shocked to learn that both the headmaster and a current senior teacher gave references for his perpetrator. Louise Milligan reports, and a warning, some viewers may find this story confronting.
St Kevin's College student Paris Street was a star runner. He was trained by a man who had coached the school's students for 40 years. But in 2014, Paris became aware Peter Keogh was becoming interested in more than his running.
I said that I had a Japanese oral presentation that I needed to finish, and he said that's not the only oral you'll have to do.
What did you think when he said that?
Yeah, felt very uncomfortable.
Keogh also sent Paris inappropriate Facebook messages saying things like he loved him muchly and kiss, kiss, kiss. The offending escalated when Keogh insisted on bringing Paris to his home.
He said, "Do you know why I was looking forward to today's training session?" He said that he had got an erection.
Police charged Peter Keogh with grooming for sexual conduct with a child under 16.
After the court case in 2015, Paris Street was shocked to learn that the current Dean of Sport at St Kevin's had given character evidence for Keogh. He also discovered that the college's headmaster, Stephen Russell, had written a reference for after Keogh was convicted of the grooming offence.
How did you feel about that?
Just gutted.
It is quite extraordinary that a headmaster and the Dean of Sport in particular will basically disregard the vulnerable student and support an offender. I mean, what planet are we on?
St Kevin's headmaster, Stephen Russell, declined to comment on writing the reference for Peter Keogh, but said in a statement that after conviction, Keogh was banned from entering the school or having contact with its students. Louise Milligan, ABC News.
In our ongoing Road to Recovery series, tonight we're taking you to Braidwood, a town in the southern Tablelands, which, like many communities, is still feeling the profound effects of the bushfire crisis. Dan Bouchier is in Braidwood and joins me now. Dan, the fire is out, but how is the township faring?
Juanita, good evening. You'd have to say this is a community that came together to fight those fires, and now it's a community coming together to rebuild. And the stories I've been hearing as I've spent some days here have been as harrowing as they are heroic. In fact, one local resident just told me that it was like living in a cul-de-sac, one road in, one road out, the rest of the community completely cut off by fire. And she said at some instances she'd look out her window and see the flames off in the distance. Her husband was fighting them and she didn't know where he was or how to get in touch with him. It's those sort of stories that are at the centre of assessing what happened here, but also the rebuilding, and it's certainly what I've been looking at as well. As a seasoned firefighter and Aikido trainer, Matthew Hull says there are clear parallels between the dojo and the fire ground.
It's a war and we go and fight.
With a simple rule of engagement.
You only can fight when you can win.
He was in the middle of fire training when he joined the fight against this blaze, captured by his wife coming over the hill and threatening his home.
44 hours I did. I cleaned up my stuff, pulled it, packed my rig, did a shift on the firefighting, defended my house, went and defended my mate's farm. Then came home and literally fell over from exhaustion.
Dealing with the exhaustion after the crisis is what drives therapist Holly Baker-Bolshevak, who has seen the community rally.
That community support is ongoing, and I do think that we will see more and more either resilience building through that is going to show up more and more over the next few months, and the unravelling is going to happen as well. Everyone's still just trying to get back to everyday life.
At the height of the fires, she swept into action as part of this so-called Mozzie crew who manage and monitor spot fires working alongside the RFS. Amid the politics of climate change, land management and backburning, the community is sending one clear message. They are open for business and want visitors.
Going forward is what we need. People coming through Braidwood, going out to Bateman's Bay, helping them out there, moving down the coast, but stopping here in Braidwood maybe for a day or two, plug into our community.
As well as that business support, the community also wants more considered assistance.
We don't need more crates of bottled water. We need, permanent bricks and mortar.
My thoughts are, if the fire recovery money goes to programs where the service industries are being supported, then we've got the two ways. We've got the therapy happening and the service industries are being protected and supported as well.
Fighting the fires brought this community together. Now it's also helping them rebuild.
And Dan, not far from Braidwood, there's another big rebuilding operation underway in the Snowy Mountains.
Juanita, you'll have remembered seeing the images of those fires that tore through Kosciuszko National Park, that destroyed some of the ski runs there and some luxury accommodation, many of the vineyards and also the apple farms in that broader region as well. And that most certainly is work that is getting underway. In many instances, we hear that it could take years, if not decades or even longer, for those plants to regrow, that vegetation to really take hold again. And in amongst all of that, there's a big community discussion around these parts about money and support and where the government services are and when they're going to be here to help those on the ground who need it the most. Juanita.
Dan Bouchier reporting there. And we'll continue our Road to Recovery series on Sunday night. This time we'll be in Port Macquarie on the mid-north coast. On to finance now, and the Australian dollar crept a little higher today while the local share market ended flat. Here's Alan Kohler.
The exchange rate has stayed around 67 US cents for about a fortnight, while the US dollar has appreciated about 2%. So the Aussie has kept up with it, which is a little surprising since the US dollar has been bid up as a safe haven currency in the light of worries about the coronavirus. Whereas the Australian economy is the most exposed in the West to China, so arguably no safe haven. And here's one aspect of that exposure. Chinese students in Australia, a five-fold increase in 15 years, from 50,000 to 250,000, mostly in higher education. And here's an indication of what's happened to the travel plans of Chinese people. It's a chart of daily visitor arrivals in Hong Kong, down from 220,000 per day to fewer than 3,000. And something similar is going on here. But investors on the share market seem more concerned with finding opportunities to make money out of it, like Zuno Group, which makes hand sanitisers, and shot up 25% today. Brambles reported a decent interim profit. AMP is still basking in the glow of its $2.5 billion loss. The radiology software firm Pro Medicus, which took investors on a wild ride last year from $10 to $40 and then back to $20, had some harsh treatment today after its results last week. And CBA ended a four-day run of gains that added $12 billion to its market value. The Chinese share market has now regained almost all of what it lost after the Lunar New Year holiday, and commodities were mostly a bit weaker, apart from gold and black gold. And that's finance.
Australia is the team to beat in the Women's T20 World Cup. Ahead of Friday's opening game, captains of the 10 teams faced the cameras at Sydney's Taronga Zoo and admitted it's going to be a tough competition. National Sport reporter David Mark was there.
This may be the last time for a month that the captains of the 10 teams competing for the World Cup will be this relaxed.
Are you doing that? No, that's the word.
Most of them nominated Australia to defend the cup they won in 2018, but some other teams are clearly a threat.
I think England. I'm going to go with India.
I think South Africa.
I will supporting all the team.
Women's cricket has been growing and becoming ever more competitive, thanks in part to the WBBL, which attracts some of the world's best players, including 8 of New Zealand's T20 squad.
Yeah, we had microphones hooked up in all the change rooms as well, so it's great intel for us.
Australia will go into the competition as favourite, but recent losses and the scratchy form of star batter and wicketkeeper Elisa Healy, who scored just 15 runs in 5 innings in the recent tri-series with India and England, is a concern.
And she's gone. Her poor run of form continues.
There's no doubt she would have loved to score some more runs in the tri-series, but I think she's shown, especially over the last 2 years, how good she is and how dangerous she is.
With quality players like that, you just got to keep backing them in because they can win your matches.
It's been a long and disjointed cricket season for the men and the women, and with the football seasons already ramping up, there are concerns that this event might be coming too late. But Australia's captain Meg Lanning isn't worried about capturing the public's attention.
Yeah, it's going to be some really high quality cricket, so I think that will certainly get people to the games and watching.
Officials are hoping a crowd of up to 100,000 will pack the MCG for the final in March. Australia will open the tournament against India in Sydney on Friday, with everyone looking to get in the picture. David Mark, ABC News.
Australia's Adam Scott has broken a 4-year drought on the US PGA Tour with victory in Los Angeles. A birdie on the 17th hole helped Scott gain control on a tough final day at the Riviera Country Club. Scott kept his composure on the 18th hole to claim a 2-stroke win.
Yeah. It's official.
It's amazing. I've loved this place from day one, and it was tough out there today, but the crowd is incredible. I feel like they're on my side here, believe it or not, and I'm stoked with this.
The 39-year-old joins Cameron Smith and Mark Leishman as Australian winners on the US Tour this year. Almost $10 million has been raised from a bushfire relief concert held in Sydney at the weekend. British rock band Queen, fronted by Adam Lambert, headlined yesterday's Firefight Australia concert. More than 20 other acts also performed, raising funds for communities devastated by bushfires. In a filmed message, Prince William sent his support.
We want to commend the bravery and the resilience of all Australians involved, particularly the volunteer firefighters who have put their lives on the line to protect lives, livelihoods, wildlife. We think that's been a fantastic effort.
75,000 people attended the show, which was broadcast live around the world. Back to the weather now, and it was a thundery start to the day for parts of Sydney, Graham.
Yeah, it was, particularly through the northern areas, and unusually those thunderstorms crept in from the west. We don't often see them coming from the inland that early in the morning, but we did see them pick up a little bit through the afternoon. So they were fairly active across the northern suburbs this morning. We saw a few of those showers and thunderstorms pop up in the middle of the afternoon, with the area from about Blacktown through to Maryland recording some falls of around 10 to 14 millimetres. And severe thunderstorms were also very active about the northeast of the state. We saw widespread moderate falls across parts of the Hunter, the mid-north coast, the central and northern tablelands, and broad areas saw falls ranging from around 50 to 70 millimetres. And Coonamble recorded a wind gust with a thunderstorm to 122 kilometres per hour, and also saw 57 millimetres of rainfall. Now, the warning still remains in place, pretty much north of areas from about Coffs through to Dubbo and then east of Burke. Now, trough that's been pretty much stationary over the inland for quite some time now is actually going to start to move east tomorrow. This is as a cold front and a low pressure system move across Victoria and then out into the Tasman Sea. So instability, showers and thunderstorms will increase over the eastern half of the state. We've also got strong south to southwesterly winds developing in behind it. And that's what's expected to see dust developing over the western and southern parts of the state before those winds and the dust begin to ease off during Wednesday. Heatwave conditions have been very persistent through the northeast tropics of Queensland, but they are easing, although showers and thunderstorms in Darwin, Melbourne and Canberra are all looking at potentially becoming severe during tomorrow afternoon. So today's heavy falls in the northeast may not be repeated tomorrow, as thunderstorms and showers will be faster moving, but that means damaging winds could be more of a feature with them. The central and southern ranges and slopes should record the more widespread rainfall. So in the northeast, we've got partly cloudy conditions. There's quite a good chance of some showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon and evening, possibly severe, although they're less likely about the northern rivers. Freshening north to northeast winds on all the coastal waters. We've got widespread showers and thunderstorms for most areas, though a little less likely, or a little more likely, I should say, along the tablelands. Locally severe thunderstorms as well, and freshening northwest winds. And winds will reach strong on offshore waters south of Green Cape in the evening. Partly cloudy with showers and thunderstorms, although more likely in the northern half, and raised dust over the western half. On Sydney waters, offshore winds will become fresh in the evening. We've got lows of 19 to 21, tops will reach 27 to 34. It'll be a sunny morning. The showers and isolated thunderstorms should then develop in the afternoon and they could potentially be severe. We see an easing of conditions Wednesday, Thursday, but as we move into the weekend, onshore winds means more showers, Juanita.
Thanks, Graham. Lee Sales is here now with 7:30.